Welcome to Social Media Marketing. This is Sean Canary. Hope everybody's doing well this week. This week, you have two assignments that are due. The first assignment is the Stukent quiz for Chapter 5, which we'll talk about Chapter 5 here in a minute. And the other assignment due is your Week 1 of your Stukent Mimic simulation. Again, your simulation asks you various questions and does the best to simulate a true social media presence for a company. Now, again, I'm not looking for any specific results. I'm looking for participation more than anything. So I want you to engage with the simulation, follow the instructions, and again, apply what you learn throughout the class. So in week 1, I expect you to participate and do your best. But by the time the simulation reaches round 4, you should be improving with each round of the simulation. Again, take what you've learned in the book so far and apply it to your simulation. So let's talk a little bit about Chapter 5. And when we talk about Chapter 5, we're talking about the strategic use of social media. So in the past chapters, we talked about how to perform a social media audit, a little bit of background about the platforms themselves, as well as the idea of how social media works. So in Chapter 5, we're going to talk about the core elements of strategic social media marketing for a business. We're going to understand that social media marketing has to take a value-driving perspective when it comes to businesses. We're also going to have to consider the risk of social media marketing and ensure strategy planning factors in potential risks and downsides. Because I'd like to say that every social media campaign works, but a lot of times it could backfire or make no ripples at all. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, we're going to talk about the main decisions that should be made when developing or adjusting a social media strategy for a brand or company. There's a series of questions you need to ask yourself as you're developing that social media strategy. So let's jump into it and let's talk a little bit about social media marketing and really think about the social media flow and how information flows. When you're planning your social media strategy, you need to keep in mind that social media, while being a marketing and advertising platform for businesses, it really differentiates itself from traditional marketing, where it is from company to consumer, as indicated with this gray arrow. Usually, with traditional advertising such as TV and mail and radio, the company pushes out messages. And social media is completely different because not only does it push out messages, but the company can get information back to them in the form of conversations from consumers. Not only that, but consumers can have conversations with other consumers about your brand or company on social. So again, when you're thinking about your social media strategy and you're planning for social media, don't just plan for pre-planned messages to push out. Plan for messages to spur conversations, to engage with consumers that are having conversations with each other. That's really a good, well-rounded social media plan. Planning, pre-planned, pushed messages, engaging with consumers who comment and react to your posts. And of course, participating in conversations that our consumers are having with each other regarding your brand. Now, when we talk about strategic thinking concerning social media marketing, we must account for all these types of information flows. Again, strategic social media marketing should not be intended to completely replace company to consumer information flows with consumers to company and consumer to consumer flows. Again, we want all three happening at the same time. Brands can be clever about their company to consumers information flows and try to use them not simply as a way to push information, but to instead start conversations between consumers or from consumers back to the company. When we think about driving value with social media, we must ask ourselves, what are the objectives of social media marketing for this brand? What are we trying to accomplish here? Are our objectives sales based or are they communications based? So you really, with each campaign and with each platform and strategy, you really need to ask yourself, what are the objectives of this plan? Is it to sell something? Or is it to create brand awareness? Is it to promote your campaigns? You really need to ask yourself this, and this is a value-driving perspective question. For any given objective that you create, you must create SMART goals. And what are SMART goals? SMART goals are significant, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-based. For example, significant. Is this a significant campaign objective? Is this enough to help move the needle? Simply don't do something just to do it. It's got to help achieve a certain goal or help a certain way. The next, is it measurable? Again, this is why we did the audit for social media. This gives you an idea of when you're comparing yourself to your competitors and your peers, what would be idealistic numbers to measure against? How many comments should your post receive? What can you expect in your market? Again, when you're comparing yourself against two local competitors, you can have a better idea of competitor A receives around 15 engagements per post, and competitor B gets around 20 engagements per post. So a measurable goal may be 25 engagements per year for your posts. Again, measurable, making sure that your goal is measurable. Make sure it's actionable too. Make sure that you can take action upon it. And make sure that it's realistic. Make sure that your goal is realistic and not some hairy, audacious goal. Make sure that it is set on realistic numbers and realistic expectations. Finally, it's always important to make sure that your goals are time-based. Give yourself a certain time to accomplish these goals and put things in motion based off that time frame. So when we talk about who gets value and when in social media, we really need to understand that both the company and the customers need to benefit in order for a social media strategy to be value driving. There's got to be something in it for both the consumers and the company that has the social media channel. It can be research and development. It can be a number of different things. But again, we need to plan for that it's got to benefit both the company and consumers. Another thing that we need to keep in mind is not all social media plans go according to plan. Sometimes the most well-intentioned social media plans completely backfire on you. And you need to understand those risks before you start one. For instance, the New York City Police Department created a social media campaign where they were trying to, reverse the animosity towards their police department with recent events that transpired by having a social media contest saying, do you have a photo with a member of the NYPD Blue? Tweet and tag my NYPD and may be featured in our Facebook. Again, the intentions were to start a conversation to create goodwill with the people of New York, and it completely backfired. People were posting pictures of New York City cops' police brutality and tagging it my NYPD. Not a good reaction to this contest. In fact, somebody posted the best part of my NYPD, dogs being frisked. And again, more images of police and violence. Doesn't stop there. Even the biggest brands have problems sometimes. McDonald's back in 2012 had a contest where they asked people to use the hashtag McDStories in tweets that told stories about happy times they had at McDonald's. In fact, McDonald's even paid Twitter to advertise this promoted tweet and to really get that hashtag out there and to hopefully drive some of those stories. Problem was that not all the tweets that they got back were happy stories. In fact, most of them were not. Like this one. One time I walked in McDonald's and I could smell type 2 diabetes floating in the air and I threw up. Another one which has more chemicals, Marlboro cigarette or an Egg McMuffin. Flip a coin. Sometimes the best plans go awry. And social media, this can happen. We live in a time where social media is very powerful and things can quickly snowball on you. So you need to think about value and worry about the risks associated with it. Because again, some of the risks that could be associated with it are the risks that nothing happens or nobody pays attention, or like in the NYPD and McDonald's example, a huge negative reaction. So again, consider those broad types of risks and the potential downsides with social media. Finally, the last thing we'll talk about is the main questions that you need to ask yourself when you're planning a social media strategy for a company, right? And again, we talked about this, right? What marketing or business objectives are we hoping to achieve through our social media plan or activities? That is, what should our purposes be for using social media? Is it to sell? Is it to create awareness? What are those? How do we see social media fitting into the rest of our marketing plan? What should it be its role in overall marketing strategy? Key to a good advertising and marketing plan is an integrated marketing communications plan where it varies, where it has different elements, because not one person uses all forms of communications and channels. The key is to have a plan that touches every channel. That way you get a wide variety of consumers. Your plan needs to include PR. It needs to include traditional advertising, TV, radio, newspaper, magazine advertising, print advertising, and also social media and digital advertising. Number 3, what is the value proposition of social media to the company for its brand? How will social media help? Who should be the target audiences in the own social media channels? Again, for your final project, I'm going to ask you, who is your target audience? Your week 1 assignment where you picked your company. I needed to understand who your target consumers were. For your final project, I expect you to plan that out. What content do you want to have on your own social media channels? How do you differentiate or emulate your competitors on social media channels? Again, this is why we did that social media audit, learning what they did well and building upon that, and what they didn't do well and not doing that. What social interactions need to happen to help achieve our objectives? How do we ensure that social actions take place as desired? These are some of the main questions that you need to ask yourself. Are there any undesirable social interactions that may arise? How can we mitigate risks? When should these social interactions take place? Where should these social interactions take place? What channels should we use? What is the value proposition of social media to the targeted audiences? How do we implement? And what is our step-by-step plan and timeline? Who's responsible for implementing the strategy? And what are the resource requirements in time of financial, labor, and other costs? Finally, how are we going to monitor and measure performance? Who's responsible? How often should this occur? These are all main questions that you need to ask yourself for planning a social media strategy. So again, wrapping up Chapter 5. Please finish the quiz that's located in your Stu-Kent book, along with the first round of the Stu-Kent Mimic simulation. Until next week, have a fantastic week.